Cash feels safe because it is familiar, because it is still, because it does nothing and asks nothing, but that silence is exactly where the danger lives every day. Money left untouched loses strength, not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, invisibly, relentlessly. Inflation eats value the way rust eats steel, slowly enough to be ignored, but steadily enough to destroy. And while bank balances appear stable, the real cost of living rises: food, housing, energy, time. Everything becomes more expensive while cash remains frozen. This creates the illusion of security while guaranteeing decline, because safety without growth is decay. Governments print money to solve problems, and every new unit printed weakens the ones already earned, turning hard work into diluted value. Banks reward savers with interest that rarely keeps pace and often falls far behind, which means loyalty to cash is punished, not protected. History has proven this cycle again and again. Currencies weaken, systems reset, rules change, and those holding only cash are left reacting instead of positioned. The real danger is not loss. It is erosion, because erosion does not trigger fear, it triggers comfort, and comfort delays action. Wealthy minds recognize this trap immediately. They understand that money is either moving forward or falling backward. There is no standing still. Time magnifies every decision, and idle cash wastes time. The most valuable asset of all, purchasing power, lost today requires far more effort to recover tomorrow, and that gap widens with every year of inaction. This is why the wealthy treat cash as a temporary state, not a destination, a tool, not a strategy. They hold it briefly, then deploy it deliberately, because they understand that value must be defended actively, not stored passively. The silent erosion of cash is the cost of inaction, and those who ignore it are not playing safe. They are slowly surrendering control while believing nothing is wrong, until one day everything costs more, and the money that once felt sufficient no longer is. The wealthy do not trust idle cash, because they understand that money sitting still is exposed to forces that work against it every single day. Inflation reduces purchasing power regardless of intent, and this loss compounds over time, turning saved effort into diminished future value. Banks provide accessibility but not protection, because interest rates are structured to benefit institutions rather than individuals and rarely compensate for real inflation, which means cash holders are effectively paying a hidden tax for doing nothing. The wealthy also recognize that modern money is policy-driven, not scarce, and can be created in unlimited quantities, which makes long-term reliance on it mathematically flawed, especially during periods of economic stress when rules can change without warning. Withdrawal limits, freezes, and devaluations reveal that cash safety is conditional, not guaranteed. Idle cash also represents lost opportunity, because capital has the potential to multiply only when it is placed into productive systems, and every year it remains unused is a year of compounding that can never be recovered. Wealthy individuals think in decades and understand that time rewards movement, not hesitation. They also avoid the psychological trap of comfort, because cash encourages delay and fear of action, while ownership forces discipline and long-term thinking. Experience teaches them that true security comes from control over assets, income, and systems, rather than trust in institutions and balances on a screen, which is why idle cash is viewed not as safety but as weakness waiting to be exposed. Real assets that cannot be printed form the backbone of lasting wealth, because they exist independently of financial systems, currencies, and policies, and derive value from scarcity. Utility and physical presence. Land remains valuable because no authority can create more of it. Buildings hold worth because people always need shelter, workspaces, and infrastructure. Natural resources maintain demand because modern life depends on energy, materials, and production. Unlike cash, which relies on trust and stability, real assets rely on necessity, which makes them resilient during inflation, crises, and systemic shifts. As currencies weaken, prices of tangible assets rise, naturally adjusting to preserve purchasing power. This automatic protection is why wealth consistently flows into property, farmland, commodities, and infrastructure during uncertain times. Real assets also provide control, because ownership removes dependence on institutions and intermediaries, allowing wealth holders to decide how assets are used, developed, or monetized. These assets can generate income, appreciation, or both, creating multiple layers of value while remaining grounded in reality. They cannot be erased by policy decisions, diluted by money printing, or frozen by digital restrictions. History shows that while empires fall and currencies change, real assets endure, transferring value across generations to those who understand their importance. The wealthy do not chase real assets for speed or excitement. They accumulate them patiently, knowing that permanence beats speculation, scarcity beats promises, and ownership beats trust in systems that were never designed to protect long-term wealth. Ownership in businesses is one of the most powerful wealth-building tools because it converts money into a system that produces value rather than a balance that waits for permission to grow. When ownership exists, money gains direction, leverage, and purpose. Businesses generate profit, create jobs, solve problems, and adapt pricing as costs rise, which allows them to move with inflation instead of being crushed by it. Unlike cash, business ownership provides control over decision-making, strategy, and growth, which shifts the individual from participant to architect to value. Owners benefit from compounding because profits can be reinvested to expand operations, increase efficiency, and scale impact over time. This creates exponential growth rather than linear accumulation. Wealthy individuals focus on ownership because it separates income from time, allowing value to be created even when effort is not directly applied. Businesses can generate dividends, equity appreciation, and strategic influence all at once, which multiplies the return on capital. Ownership also builds resilience because strong businesses evolve with markets, technology, and consumer behavior, while cash remains static and vulnerable. History shows that most long-term wealth is created not through saving but through owning productive enterprises. Because businesses adjust, innovate, and survive across cycles, owning part of a business means owning future cash flow, ideas, and systems, which creates lasting advantage and independence. This is why the wealthy seek equity, not wages, leverage, not limits in ownership, not promises, because control over production is control over wealth creation. Precious metals function as financial insurance because they exist outside the control of governments, banks, and monetary policy, and have maintained value across thousands of years of economic cycles, wars, collapses, and currency failures. Gold and silver are not promises, they are assets with intrinsic scarcity that cannot be created by printing or diluted by policy decisions, which is why they retain trust when confidence in paper money weakens. The wealthy do not rely on precious metals to generate rapid growth, but to preserve purchasing power during periods of instability, inflation, and systemic risk. When currencies lose value, metals historically rise because they are priced against weakening money rather than failing themselves. This inverse relationship makes them a stabilizing force within a diversified portfolio, acting as protection rather than speculation. Precious metals also carry no counterparty risk because ownership does not depend on an institution remaining solvent or honoring obligations, which means they cannot default, freeze, or disappear due to digital restrictions. Their physical nature provides certainty in uncertain environments, and their global acceptance ensures liquidity across borders and systems. History repeatedly shows that when trust in financial systems erodes, trust flows back to tangible stores of value, and metals stand at the top of that hierarchy. The wealthy understand that true security is not about returns alone, but about survival across scenarios. And precious metals serve as a hedge against the unknown, preserving wealth when traditional assets fail and ensuring that value endures regardless of economic narratives, policy shifts, or systemic shocks. Income-producing investments are central to building lasting financial strength because they transform capital from a static resource into a system that continually generates value. These assets include rental properties, dividend-paying stocks, bonds, royalties, and other vehicles that provide consistent cash flow, allowing wealth to grow independently of active labor. Or speculation. The wealthy prioritize these investments because they create resilience and stability, providing a reliable source of income regardless of market volatility and economic cycles. Income-producing assets also compound powerfully over time because generated cash can be reinvested to acquire additional assets, increase exposure, or diversify into new opportunities. Unlike cash, which remains stagnant, income flows work continuously to build wealth even when attention is not focused on them. This reduces dependence on wages and short-term market timing, creating freedom and flexibility in financial decision-making. Multiple income streams add layers of protection because if one slows or underperforms, others continue to contribute, creating consistency and reducing risk. The psychological effect is equally important because predictable cash flow removes pressure to react impulsively to market fluctuations or economic panic. It shifts focus from speculation to strategy, from temporary gains to sustainable growth, and from financial anxiety to control over the systems that generate wealth. This is why the wealthy do not simply accumulate money, but actively deploy it into assets that produce continuous income, ensuring that capital is always working and compounding even while their attention is elsewhere. Strategic alternative investments provide the wealthy with opportunities that go beyond traditional markets and conventional thinking. These assets include private equity, infrastructure, venture capital, hedge funds, and carefully selected digital or niche assets that offer asymmetric returns and diversification. Beyond stocks, bonds, and cash, the appeal lies in their ability to combine protection with growth. Because these investments are often less correlated to public markets, they can perform independently when traditional assets falter, providing stability and a hedge against systemic risk. Wealthy individuals use strategic alternatives to spread risk intelligently, avoiding overexposure to any single sector or market, while capturing opportunities that are otherwise inaccessible. These assets are not about speculation or chasing hype. They are about positioning capital where upside potential significantly outweighs downside risk, and where expertise, access, and timing create advantage. Because entry requires knowledge, diligence, and strategy, they are inherently selective and deliberate. Private equity allows ownership and control over businesses that are not publicly traded. Infrastructure investments provide long-term stable cash flows and essential societal utility, while venture capital allows participation in innovation and future market leaders. Hedge funds can implement complex strategies that seek profit in any market condition, and digital or niche assets can provide growth in emerging sectors. The wealthy deploy these alternatives as part of a broader plan to protect capital, generate income, and capture outsized returns while maintaining flexibility and resilience. Across economic cycles, the choice to leave cash idle is a choice to let value slowly erode, and the wealthy understand that true financial strength comes from movement, from strategy, from positioning, rather than passivity. And holding money in a bank account may feel safe, but safety without growth is weakness. Disguised as security, every day that money sits still, it loses potential opportunity and purchasing power because inflation silently diminishes its value over time. The wealthy do not wait for perfect conditions to act. They recognize that time amplifies decisions and that action compounds advantage, while inaction compounds loss. Shifting from safety to strength requires clarity, understanding, and courage, because it demands confronting habits that feel comfortable but are ultimately destructive. It requires viewing cash not as an end, but as a tool to deploy into assets that produce growth, income, and protection. It demands a mindset that prioritizes ownership, control, and strategic exposure over temporary stability. Wealth is built through systems that generate returns, businesses that scale, assets that appreciate, and investments that produce continuous cash flow, and these cannot be created by sitting still waiting for luck or relying on promises. The move from safety to strength is deliberate and intentional because it is a commitment to take control of financial destiny, to use capital as a tool to create more value, to align money with forces that preserve and grow. Purchasing power. Over time, it is about turning passive security into active resilience, moving from fear to empowerment, from stagnation to growth, from illusion to reality, and every decision made to deploy resources thoughtfully compounds over years into freedom, opportunity, and enduring wealth. This is the moment to act, the moment to think long-term, and the moment to commit to systems, assets, and strategies that create strength rather than mere safety.